Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Biblio Files, a show from the Ann Arbor District Library in Michigan that's all about books. Each episode, we spend just a few minutes talking about a book from a pre-designated theme, and this time we're talking about Alex Award winners. The Alex Award is given out to 10 books every year that are written for adults, but that have a special appeal to readers age 12 to 18. I'm Christopher, and I'm joined as always by Amanda and Lucy. And we have a special guest, Lakeisha, today that I'm really happy to have on. So, Amanda, what book did you pick for us?
All right. So historically, I always loved the Alex Award and I would try to read as many as I could. I just loved that award so much. Then I branched off into a million other things that I loved award wise. But I decided to read something new to me for this award. And I read The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. This came out in 2020. It was fairly popular. It had been on my to reread list, but I kind of sat on it for a little while because so many other books danced across my table. But the book is adult fiction and it falls under the fantasy category, kind of a light fantasy. I was drawn to it because it involves magical youth, which I thought sounded fun. So in this book, the main protagonist is a young man. He's around 40. His name is Linus, and he leads a pretty quiet, solitary life. He lives in a small house with his cat, but he's a caseworker and he works for the department in charge of magical youth. And he oversees the cases of children who are in these government sanctioned orphanages. And Linus is given a very top secret assignment of going over to Marcius Island and observing and evaluating the orphanage there, as well as its caretaker and these 6 terribly dangerous magical children. So Linus gets his folders. He's not supposed to read the folders, these case files of these children or the caseworker or the house before he gets there. So when he's there on the bus stop, like I think just before he's getting on the ferry to go to the island, he reads about who is over there. And when Linus gets there, the 6 kids in question are a gnome, a sprite, an unidentifiable green blob, a were-Pomeranian, a 4-legged dragon-like creature, and the Antichrist. So he walks in knowing he had just found out who was there, and he gets there, and he has an opinion at the beginning, and he has an opinion at the end. And it's delightful to see how everything transpires in the book. So the caretaker of the house is a man named Arthur, and the kids sort of see him, they really do, as sort of like a father figure. And they have this familial bond as they're sitting around the dinner table. And it's fun to watch Linus kind of blend into the family a little bit. And he kind of grows fond of some of the kids. And he joins them at the dinner table. They go on adventures together. One of my favorite parts of the book was watching the personalities of the kids just come to life and to seeing how Arthur deals with them like it's everyday circumstances of this giant green blob who's named Chauncey, whose biggest goal in life is to become the very best bellhop he can. And then to see how Linus adapts to that. And pretty soon Linus, that's just how it is. Chauncey wants to be a bellhop. And yes, you may carry my luggage around. It's just, I really love those parts. There's a lot of heart to the book. And those are sort of the heart elements to it. But Linus is there to do a job. He has to evaluate these dangerous kids, as well as the caretaker and how well he's taking care of the kids, and then the house itself. Like, should it basically exist? Are these kids safe enough? Because one of the kids, the Antichrist, they call him Lucy for short, but he's a 6-year-old adorable little boy. So you've got this kid who wants to bring on the end of the world and all of us playtime, but then like Arthur talks him down. So there are other dangerous elements to some of the kids in the story. You learn some secrets that are happening. But yeah, Linus is there to do this job. He's got to report back these files of what's going on at the house. So it's interesting. There's more heart than darkness to it. There's a little bit of like fantasy with the magic and some of the things that the kids do. And they're like the boy who turns into a Pomeranian, and that's his thing. But I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. It also, part of it is that these kids they're not these scary kids with these magical powers. They're just kids. And maybe one of them wants to bring about the end of the world. Maybe one of them, is a tiny, tiny little bearded gnome who is obsessed with her garden and wants to bury dead bodies in it. when you're in the house, they're just kids. They're not, scary kids or kids with magical powers. They're just like kids who are being kids, and they're just a family trying to be a family. So I really enjoyed the book. I can see why people were drawn to it. It's an easy breezy book. I don't know what red flags I would put up as far as content for scariness, but I thought it was a nice little light fantasy for somebody who doesn't read a lot of fantasy. So I don't know if any of you all read that book, but that's what I chose for this week for the Alex Award winner. Lakeisha, thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited to hear what you picked. What do you got for us?
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I chose The Boy Who Couldn't Sleep and Never Had to by D.C. Pearson. It's a 2011 winner of the Alex Award. It's listed under humor and sci-fi. Sci-fi is usually something that's not my genre that I like to read, but it was interesting. The title is what really got me because I wanted to know, why is this person not sleeping and A-okay. So the book is about two high school boys who become friends unexpectedly. Darren is a loner who draws really well. And then Eric also is a loner, but he's got this secret that he's caring about never having to sleep, never sleeping and never having to. So then they develop a friendship beginning with Eric's curiosity about Darren's drawings. And then they decide to design a graphic novel and create a villain who they call the Man. Meanwhile, while this is going on, Eric does confide in Darren and say, hey, this is what I have. I can, I don't have to sleep. And it's kind of a big deal. So then Eric starts to become a little too friendly with Darren's girlfriend, Christine. And then Darren becomes jealous. So he winds up ultimately like telling somebody else, like the local authorities, it gets to them that this boy has this thing. And it turns out that he also has the power to bring things into this world. So he can manifest. So Darren can draw something and he can manifest it, whether it's good or bad, he can manifest it into our world. So what happens is the man wants to harm Eric. And of course, local authorities are looking for him. But Darren feels really bad about the fact that he told on his friend. So they actually wind up going across country to try to escape this. So at the, not the complete end, but towards the end, they wind up having to make a decision as to whether they want to band together, basically put, the jealousy and the rift aside, band together and fight, or if they're just going to give into, the consequences. So like I said, it was a very interesting book. I didn't expect to finish it, to be honest. I thought maybe I was going to stop, mid book and have to choose something else. Cause like I said, it's different than what I thought, but it's got that teenage angst in it and that romance and, a little bit of humor. And like I said, that kind of sci-fi element with him being able to bring stuff into our world. So it was an interesting read. I can say that.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
I love that title. That is like a life goal of mine, to not sleep and not have to sleep, because then I could just only read. So, and also I'm glad that I was mentioned in your book, Amanda, as the devil. So that was cool. Lucy.
Yeah. I forgot to mention too, I listened to the audiobook for my book. I listened to the audio and I really, really loved the audio. Hearing the different voices of the characters was great. So I can't believe I forgot to mention it.
Yeah. Well, and you have Lucy and Linus, like Lucy and Linus Van Pelt from the Peanuts. Anyway.
Yeah. Well,
yeah. The book I have a nonfiction book to talk about that was published in 2016. So it won in 2016. And it is called The Wasp That Brainwashed the Caterpillar. This is by Matt Simon. Matt Simon is the science writer for Wired magazine. And he presents in this book a really entertaining look at the weirder side of evolution. One review described it as evolution's frightening billion-year arms race. So it's like kind of these little weird niches where a certain animal or creature will evolve because of something that changed around it, and another animal evolves with it. So they have these really specific roles. It's fascinating. And, all species eventually have to adapt to changing environments, especially now. And so this book really focuses on finding the stranger ways that they have done that. And one of the things I loved about reading it is just like, you see how precise science can be and how well it can work in these like really unusual things. And there are some animals that use camouflage. There's some that use mind control. There are animals that live in really strange places, like within other animals. None of it goes very into depth into one particular animal relationship. He's a very funny writer. It took a little bit to get used to his style, but once I did, I really enjoyed reading it. And he even mentions in the acknowledgments, he says, like, I think he says, he thanks his mom for the snark. And he says, thank you, Mom, for the snark, which either got readers through this book or made them put it down after the first chapter, which I thought was pretty funny. So he acknowledges his style. But I just have to share with you, like, so some of the things you've heard of in here, like the anglerfish, and I was fascinated to learn that anglerfish that you see with the light from its head, that's just the female. The male is like tiny creature that is basically a parasite within the female. That's how that system works, and it's fascinating. But then there are ones that are called like the ant decapitating fly, which, you know, that sort of tells you what might go on there. One of my favorites I have to share with you is the tongue-eating isopod. So this is an isopod, a crustacean that lives in the ocean, and it lives within a certain fish, and it actually latches onto the fish's gills and tongue, and it becomes the fish's tongue. So the fish loses its tongue, and it learns how to eat with the isopod as its tongue. And the isopod exists in the fish's mouth. And the isopod is neither male nor female until another isopod comes along. And if like a male isopod comes along, then that one will turn into a female. If a female, so it's just like such a specific relationship. This is an example of one of the stranger things, that there's a fish out there that many of them don't have their tongue anymore. They have an isopod instead, but nobody's unhappy about it, you know? And so it's just like full of stuff like that, but he's really funny about it. And there's others that you've heard of, like the mantis shrimp probably. And I mean, I loved reading this, and I could see why it would be really appealing to teens as well. And I have to say that like this book it's short. It's not a long book. His voice makes it easy to read, but it's going to take you twice as long to read as you think if you're anything like me, because every few sentences you have to stop and grab whoever's nearest to you and be like, oh my God, this is so fascinating. I have to tell you all about this thing. So it was so much fun to read. I highly recommend it if you're at all interested in the weird ways that animals evolve and relate to each other. And that is called The Wasp That Brainwashed the Caterpillar by Matt Simon. Christopher, what did you choose?
When I was born, the name for what I was did not exist. And so begins the book I chose from the 2019 Alex Award list, Cersei by Madeline Miller. I'm not sure if any of you have read this. It was really a popular book. It tells the story of Cersei, a minor Greek goddess born without really any apparent charms or special abilities. So she plays a central or tangential role in all the stories that are in this book. And a lot of it is taken from Homer's The Odyssey, which I have not read, but I'd be kind of curious to read it now. At the beginning of the book, we see what a lonely life Cersei is leading. She's really spurned by her mother and her father and her brother that she adores and all of her relations. So she's leading this really solitary, lonely life. And she is eventually exiled to an island, but the story doesn't end there. Along the way, we meet lots and lots of great characters from mythology: Scylla and Charybdis, Odysseus, Ariadne, the Minotaur, Daedalus, and on and on and on. I loved the book. I thought it was so much fun. I thought it was such an incredibly fast read. And, you know, if I were writing a book about the gods and goddesses of mythology, it would either be super chummy and stupid, or it would be really grim and not be very entertaining. Somehow Miller writes these personalities in such an interesting way, kind of weaving this intricate thread between dopey and, overly serious. But I think her depiction of the personalities of all the gods is just fascinating. I also loved what she adds to the mythology, like this whole story of how Scylla, one of the monsters, became a monster was wonderful. So the other thing I wanted to say is that she often ends her chapters with great one-liners, and anyone who has read the book would appreciate. As it turned out, I did kill pigs that night after all, which is a very climactic, jarring chapter in the book. So it really follows a lot of her life from childhood into motherhood, all of her loves and her platonic loves. And I just adored this book so much. So that is Cersei by Madeline Miller. I'm jumping into final conclusions now, final thoughts. I was so happy to be introduced to this award and all the books in this list. It was great. Several of them I had read, but many I had not. And I wanted to read a brand new book for this episode as well. Anybody else have any parting thoughts?
I would just say this is one of my favorite awards because it takes books that you might have been familiar with, but just remind you that they appeal to a wider audience. And like, I could have picked so many things off this list. I had read some, but I really wanted to read something new because there were so many good ones. And I have read Cersei, and I would say one of my favorite things about that book was to see Cersei as a mother, like the role that she plays as a mother and how big of a part motherhood is. Like it just reframes what you think of a well-known character. So that's a good pick.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't have any major comments, just another nod for reading books that are from the Alex Award winner list. There's 10 great books every year, and there's a lot of books to pick from, especially if you're a fan of YA. Like if you're an adult who's reading, if you like YA books, but sometimes you need, like I love reading YA, but sometimes I need a bit of a break, a little palate cleanser, and I want to read like an adult fiction book just to break up some of it. The Alex Award is just, there are some really, really solid books. And you might think, well, if they're adult books written for teens, why aren't they just teen books? But there's just some elements that make it good for teens also. And it's nice to have a list. So if you have a person who's looking, like a teen who's looking to read books who are in the adult section, but if they can't go there for some reason, these books have an appeal for a reason, and they're totally wonderful books to read. So recommend checking out the Alex Award. I feel like it's kind of an unsung hero when the big list comes out. People are always like, oh, Prince Award winners, but definitely check out the Alex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I really enjoyed looking through all the books. There were so many that I basically just put a bookmark on when I was doing my search, because I'm going to go back and read some of those other ones because I just didn't know. Some of them I had just seen, just from being in the library and just kind of shrugged it off. But to know that it had won that award, and once I started reading the synopsis and things, I was like, yeah, this is something really good. So yeah, I was very happy to be introduced to some of the books that were in that list.
Yay.
Well, as always, we would love to know what you've been reading and whether you've been able to check out any Alex Award winners. So you can leave us a note in the comments below. I would especially like to thank our guest, Lakeisha, today for joining us on this episode. And until next time, enjoy your reading.